Hello, and welcome to Week 3, Unit 6 of Application Development for SAP Business by Design. In this unit, we'll look at extending standard screens. Now, we've been able to build and enhance our own screens, and then we also extended a standard SAP object. So now we obviously want to get those enhancements into those standard screens. There's a great way for us to do this, and that's using the Extensibility Explorer. We saw this a little bit earlier when we looked at the overview of the UI Designer. But now we're actually going to be able to look into the actual functionality and try it out. Now there's many standard screens that are available. We can view all these through the Configuration Explorer tab in the UI Designer, but we'll use the Extensibility Explorer once we've found the right one to be able to make our changes. And depending on what element we're looking at in that UI, there's different operations that are available to us. This could be either adding a mashup, putting in an embedded component, or in our case, adding some extension fields to a particular form view. All of these extensions are supported by what are called anchors. Now, anchors, they're kind of like PSM, but for a specific screen. Most of the screens have all the anchors we need, but there could be a case that we need one. And basically why is because if there's a place you want to extend a standard screen and it doesn't show you any options, that means there's no anchor available. You shouldn't have to be too worried about this or concerned, but I like to mention this just so you're aware in case there is a screen where you don't see an anchor in a particular place you like, and that you can file an incident and ask to see if an anchor can be provided in that particular place. Now let's go ahead and look in the UI Designer and see where these places are. So we've already extended our employee object. I'm going to go ahead and right-click on that extension object and say Enhance Screen. Now this is going to show me a pop-up here of a large list of screens, and it's large in this case because employee is a business partner, and so it's actually showing me all the screens for business partner. I don't necessarily need all of this. If I was to look at opportunity or lead, for example, it would be a much shorter list of screens, but these are all the screens that are available to a business partner. Not only desktop, but also mobile-enabled screens are on here. Now we're going to be looking for the employee screens, specifically the employee QAF, and here it is, employee QAF ECO. Now I'm going to select that and say OK. Now if I wanted to see what screen to enhance if I wasn't sure, I could always go into the UI Designer and start opening up screens from the Configuration Explorer to see what screen might be the one I want to edit. I can look at that screen, compare it to what I see in the front end, and be able to know, okay, this is the screen I need. I don't necessarily have, there's no way as of today to, let's say, to be able to go from the front end, so when the user is actually running, and say, what is this screen? Give me the name of it, the path of it. That doesn't exist for us today. So that's something that we need to think about later on when we're actually testing and making changes and trying to find the screen that we need. So that's where you'll have to dig through the Configuration Explorer. Once it loads, I can show you a great way to do that. Now I have a feeling what's happening here is that we have a pop-up. Yes, I have a pop-up again where sometimes these pop-ups come in the UI Designer. And it doesn't allow us to actually open UI Designer until we close these, but we can't easily find them. Again, if you do encounter this, just close all your screens and then open something and close it, and it should be there on the top. I'm going to go ahead and say OK, and now our UI Designer should come up, and it did. It loaded for us. Here we go. Here's the employee QAF. This is the actual screen if I'm editing employee, what I would see. Now, as I mentioned, I may have to dig around and try and find this. There's a couple ways I can do that. I can open up this SAP BYD application UI folder. This shows me all of the standard screens that are in the solution, and they try to give some good common naming to help you find it. So for example, if there's something in CRM, you can find details there about account management, opportunity. I can see HCM and the different screens that are available as well for HCM. Now, if I'm not sure where it is, I can always just type something in the search. And let's start with EMPL and say search. And it'll start searching for everything where that text exists. So if I go down, here's my employee QAF ECO. I can double click that. It shows me where in the path it is, so I can maybe know for future reference. And then I can open that screen. So you might have to try and play around with this a little bit when you first start using it to know where are the screens that you're trying to edit. Eventually you become very familiar with it, you'll know exactly where to go, but just to point out where it exists today and how to work with it. Now I'm going to say View Extensibility Explorer because this is what we're going to actually use to extend this QAF screen. So you can see in here I have a number of things, and as I select different areas, the operations that are shown to me change. The top of the Extensibility Explorer is each of the sections within the floor plan itself that I can provide some kind of change to, or at least that exist. So you can see there's a sales data table that's down here. Here we can do a couple things, whereas in the employee part over here we can do a lot more. Now what are some of these different things? Adjust properties. This is basically a way that we can take the standard fields and, pardon me, we can give some behavior to them, visibility, mandatory or not, read-only, and it's just to the field itself. So for example, if I mark employee title as mandatory, it's going to give it a little red asterisk there, a little red star. It's not going to actually do a mandatory check for it. I'd still have to code that myself in one of the actions or events, but it at least changes the UI. Same with the visibility of a specific field. If I want to make sure it's always false or true or even bound, for example, I can say bound and bind it to a flag that exists in this business object. Now you'll see at the top UI switch, this is equal to none right now. That means that for anybody who's running the application, any changes I make will be applied to them. If I was to select a specific UI switch, I could also apply it to that behavior to this particular switch. Now what is the purpose of a UI switch? Well, a UI switch is something that can be assigned to a business role. And a business role can have any number of UI switches, and any UI switch can be assigned to any number of business roles. And as I assign users these business roles, the framework will be able to look and say, okay, if you have this particular UI switch which you've maintained something for, and that switch would be found through your business roles, then apply this behavior. I can also do checks for UI switches in Absol within my actions and events if maybe I have some logic I only want to execute based on a particular UI switch as well. But this allows us to do some modification to some of the standard fields. There's also the change section group. This is how we can also provide some visibility of different fields, but also change the labeling of them. So you can say that for title it should actually be employee title, for example. And I can put that change in there. Mashup management, if I need to be able to put in mashups. We're going to talk about mashups at another time. I'll come back to the extension field. I can have a way that I can add links and buttons that actually are navigations to other screens. So an OBN link or navigation, change row count for text editor control. This will allow us to, if we have a note box, a text box, change how many rows, how big that text box is. So a common thing I hear about is, hey, I'd like to have a notes field and embed it on one of these screens. How can I do that and have it be large enough? And that's what this exact operation is going to do. And then change ID field configuration will allow us to add an OVS to an ID field that we've entered within a screen as an extension field. So these are just some operations on forms. There's other ones, like I said, tables will have their own even different sections. You'll see there's blank ones where you say add an embedded component, which we'll get to in another section. For now, let's also look at the add extension field. This is the one that's of particular interest of us. You can see here's the two extension fields we put on employee. We had a fixed bonus amount and fixed bonus indicator. I'm going to go ahead and click this checkbox add. It tells me the label and the tooltip. And tooltip is actually another annotation we can provide. We already provided the label annotation when we define these elements in our business object definition. But if we don't give it a tooltip annotation, it'll automatically take what the label is. So we see the same in both there. It tells me some info about the fields here, what the data types are. I can say if they're always display only or not. So maybe I have a field that I intend to always be read only. Nothing should ever be maintained. And then what's the actual name that I gave that element. So let's say apply, and it gives me this little pop-up about change transactions. I'm going to open this little arrow next to my operation here, and you'll see a couple change transactions. These are basically changes that were made in these operations for this floor plan. The red means it's unsaved, yellow means it's saved but not active, and green is actually active. Now I'm going to go ahead and save and activate this. As I make changes, it'll add these operations or these change transactions. And you'll notice here, if I go back, that it doesn't always tell me what the name of that change transaction is. So what was the name of the field? But if I open this XML file, it's going to show me some information. So I can see here that, okay, this was fixed bonus amount. I can usually find the name somewhere in here. So for example, if I wanted to remove it, I could do that. I could hit this little delete, and it would delete that, and that's how I could take my change out of the standard floor plan, basically remove the extension that I did to this floor plan. And this happens for any of the operations that are in here. So I can always go in, or maybe I added it, but I don't see it in the UI when I test. I can always come in and check, well, is it actually green? Is it published and active? So somebody can actually see it. A very easy mistake is to not save and activate your changes and go to test. It happens to a lot of us. You'll notice here if I go try to say display edit, it doesn't let me. It tells me I have to use the Extensibility Explorer. So this is really how we can work with standard screens and provide extensions and enhancements to them. Now these are small things. We're going to get into what's called an embedded component, which allows us to do some a little bit larger changes. But for now, here's how we can extend standard screens. So let's go ahead and go back here. So you see we're able to take our extension fields and add those to the UI. We have ways of being able to rename or hide standard fields, even say if they're read-only or mandatory or not. We can also add mashups if we need to, embedded components, search helps to any ID fields that we add. So there's a lot we can do within the Extensibility Explorer. It's a very commonly used tool that's in the UI Designer and something we'll refer to a lot. So that is enhancing standard screens and the end of this week. Next week we will go into integrations. So thank you very much.